It's very delicious to act with beautiful men.
Would you care to say which you thought the most beautiful?
Throughout her life, Angie Dickinson was no stranger to romance. As one of Hollywood's most captivating beauties, men came and went, some brought joy, others left behind nothing but regret. Yet, amid the whirlwind of fleeting flings and headline-making affairs, there was one man who stood apart from the rest. Now at 93, with the clarity that comes from a life fully lived, Dickinson is looking back and confessing the love of her life. Who is this mystery man? Join us as we pull back the curtains. Before there was Police Woman, before the flashing cameras and iconic roles, Angie Dickinson had already captivated some of the most powerful men in Hollywood. Frank Sinatra adored her. John F. Kennedy was rumored to be charmed by her. Directors cast her not just for her beauty, but because she could hold her own on screen, strong, sensual, and always in control. The men in her life made headlines, but Angie made history. She wasn't just someone men watched, she was someone audiences admired. When Angie stepped into a role, she didn't just play it, she owned it. Her breakout role as Sergeant Pepper Anderson in Police Woman wasn't just a milestone for television, it was a cultural shift. For the first time, a woman led a primetime hour-long drama, and she did it with both authority and allure. Angie knew how to work the camera, but she also knew how to work a room. Her presence was undeniable. But her story didn't begin on a red carpet, it started in a tiny town on the North Dakota prairie. Before the glitz, the gowns, and the glittering flash of Hollywood cameras, Angie Dickinson was just Angeline Brown, a small-town girl with big dreams and a spark that couldn't be dimmed. Born on September 30, 1931, in the sleepy prairie town of Combe, North Dakota, she was the middle of 3 daughters in a hard-working German-American family. Her parents, Frederica and Leo Henry Brown, had deep roots in their community. Leo, a respected newspaper publisher and editor of both the Combe Messenger and the Edgeley Mail, was a man of words and stories. That influence would run deep in Angie, who would one day captivate audiences not with ink on paper, but with the magnetic pull of her presence on screen. From the beginning, stories surrounded her. She was raised Roman Catholic and brought up in a household where discipline met imagination. Her father, ever the local Renaissance man, not only ran the paper but also served as the projectionist at the town's only movie theater. Young Angie was often transfixed by the silver screen, watching flickering black and white stories leap to life, until tragedy struck and the theater burnt down. Still, by then the seed had been planted. Movies were no longer just entertainment for her, they were magic. In 1942, at the tender age of 10, Angie's life changed dramatically. The Brown family packed up and left the quiet plains of North Dakota for the sun-soaked suburbs of Southern California. They settled in Burbank, just a stone's throw from Hollywood. Though the lights of the big city were still a world away from Angie's reality, she quickly proved she was more than just a pretty face. At 15, she graduated from Bellarmine Jefferson High School, a year after winning the 6th annual Bill of Rights essay contest, a nod to the journalistic blood running in her veins. She was whip-smart, articulate, and determined. Originally planning to follow in her father's footsteps as a writer, college followed at Immaculate Heart and Glendale Community College, where she earned a business degree by 1954. During those years, she held down jobs at the Lockheed Air Terminal, now Bob Hope Airport, and even in a parts factory. It was humble work, but Angie never saw herself as above it. She was grinding, learning, and absorbing. Then came 1952. Angie Brown became Angie Dickinson when she married football player Gene Dickinson. The name would stick long after the marriage didn't. Dickinson's breakthrough role, and fate, as it often does in Hollywood stories, came knocking unexpectedly. Angie entered a local preliminary for the Miss America contest and placed second, but it was enough to catch the eye of a casting agent. That small break landed her a gig as one of 6 glamorous showgirls on the Jimmy Durante Show. With dazzling poise and charm, she stole attention even in a lineup of beauty and talent. From there, the dominoes began to fall. A television producer saw something special in her, something beyond beauty, a presence. He encouraged her to try acting. Angie took the suggestion seriously, diving into the craft with a student's heart and a performer's soul. It wasn't long before NBC came calling, and she began appearing on the Colgate Comedy Hour and other variety shows. It was during this period that she met Frank Sinatra, who quickly became one of her closest lifelong friends, an ally and confidant in the unpredictable world of show business. Her acting debut came on New Year's Eve in 1954 in an episode of Death Valley Days. A modest start, but it was the doorway to something bigger. Angie quickly became a staple of television's golden age, taking on roles in everything from matinee theater to Buffalo Bill Jr., City Detective, and General Electric Theater. She had a rare versatility, one moment soft and heartfelt, the next fiery and unrelenting. Her appearances in Gunsmoke, The Virginian, and Cheyenne proved she could ride horses, handle guns, and command a scene with the best of them. By the late 1950s, Dickinson was one of the most recognizable faces on the small screen. Her first role, uncredited, came in 1954's Lucky Me starring the effervescent Doris Day. Blink and you'd miss her, but it was the start of something significant. Over the next couple of years, she began stacking up supporting roles. From the outset, she made it clear she wasn't interested in following the path trodden by Marilyn Monroe or Jane Mansfield. She refused to become another platinum blonde bombshell molded into a caricature appeal. Studios tried anyway, lightening her naturally rich brunette locks to a soft honey blonde, just enough to satisfy the era's beauty standards but not enough to box her in. She had range, and she intended to use it. Her big break came not with a bang, but with a slow draw in A Dusty Town, Rio Bravo, 1959. Directed by Howard Hawks, Rio Bravo was a landmark film that positioned Dickinson as a legitimate Hollywood leading lady. As Feathers, the flirtatious card dealer who catches the eye of the grizzled sheriff played by none other than John Wayne, Dickinson was luminous. She held her own against a powerhouse cast that included Dean Martin, Ricky Nelson, and Walter Brennan. And she did it with wit, sultry restraint, and a glint of mischief that made her unforgettable. From the North Dakota prairie to Hollywood royalty, Angie Dickinson's journey was anything but typical. She defied typecasting, sidestepped clichés, and became an icon not just for what she looked like, but for how she carried herself through each era of film and television. Always evolving, always in control, always unforgettable. Angie Dickinson's role in Police Woman, by the early 1970s, she had already carved out a space for herself in Hollywood. She was known for her sultry edge, her command on screen, and a resume that moved easily between B-movie grit and A-list charm. She didn't need television, but television came calling anyway in March 1974. Dickinson appeared in a single episode of Police Story, a gritty anthology series known for its realistic take on law enforcement. The episode was a hit, and so was she. Viewers responded immediately, and so did the network. NBC came back with an offer, a lead role in a spin-off, a weekly series, her own show. At first, Dickinson resisted. Television, especially for women at the time, had a reputation for flattening characters into stereotypes. But the producers made a compelling case. This role would be different. More importantly, it would put her in front of millions of viewers every week. And so, Dickinson agreed. Police Woman premiered later that year, with Dickinson starring as Sergeant Suzanne Pepper Anderson, an officer in the Los Angeles Police Department's Criminal Conspiracy Unit. She worked undercover, slipping between disguises while investigating the city's darkest corners. Earl Holliman co-starred as her commanding officer, Sergeant Bill Crowley, alongside Charles Deerkop and Ed Bernard as her fellow investigators. From the beginning, Dickinson held the screen with authority. She didn't play the role of tough just to prove something. Pepper was sharp, composed, and empathetic, a character who didn't need to shout to take control. The audience responded. The show quickly climbed the ratings, becoming a surprise hit not only in the US but in countries around the world. In an era when female leads in dramas were rare, Dickinson's presence was more than a novelty, it was a shift. She received 3 consecutive Emmy nominations for Best Lead Actress in a Dramatic Series and won a Golden Globe. Police Woman ran for 4 seasons, and during its peak, Dickinson became one of the most recognizable women on television. Still, success came at a price. Years later, in a 2019 interview, she reflected on the show with a hint of regret. The shooting schedule was relentless, the pay was underwhelming, and the time commitment meant she had to turn down roles in films that might have pushed her career in different directions. There was also the constant pressure to maintain her image. "Are my legs exploited?" she once quipped. "Well, that's all I've got to sell." Though she had creative input, Dickinson was often scripted into scenes that leaned heavily on her physical appeal, like taking a phone call while soaking in a bubble bath. She played along, but the tension between the character's substance and the industry's expectations was always there. Still, the impact of Police Woman extended far beyond ratings. Police departments across the country reported a surge in applications from women, many inspired by what they saw on screen. Pepper Anderson wasn't just a character, she became a symbol of what women could do and where they could belong. Dickinson knew the cultural moment she had helped shape. In 1987, when the Los Angeles Police Department awarded her an honorary doctorate, she accepted it with a wink, "Now you can call me Dr. Pepper." Even after the show ended in 1978, she returned to the role for parody and nostalgia alike, reprising Pepper Anderson for NBC's Ringo special with Ringo Starr and John Ritter, and poking fun at her own image in Bob Hope's Christmas specials and a 1987 episode of Saturday Night Live. Angie Dickinson's tumultuous love life, balancing a high-profile career and a deeply personal life, is a tightrope few in Hollywood walk gracefully. For Angie Dickinson, family often came first, even when the spotlight threatened to pull her in another direction. Before she became a household name, Angie married Gene Dickinson in 1952, the star of Glendale College's football team. They were college sweethearts, but their marriage ended in 1959, the same year she landed her breakthrough role as Feathers, the flirtatious gambler in Rio Bravo. That performance cemented her image as a symbol, marked the beginning of her ascent in Hollywood. In the years that followed, her personal life attracted nearly as much attention as her screen roles. Dickinson was linked romantically to some of the most powerful men in American culture, among them Frank Sinatra, her Ocean's 11 co-star, and reportedly President John F. Kennedy. But the relationship that would most define her private life began in 1965 when she married legendary composer Burt Bacharach, the man behind hits like I Say a Little Prayer and What the World Needs Now Is Love. Their marriage lasted 15 years, a stretch of time that's rare in the entertainment world. Dickinson once described herself as crazy about Bacharach, and for a time, the couple balanced fame, ambition, and affection with remarkable grace. In 1966, they welcomed their only child, a daughter named Nikki, born 3 months premature and weighing just 1 pound 10 ounces. Nikki's survival was uncertain, doctors warned her chances were slim. Angie and Burt watched their daughter's progress hour by hour, celebrating each tiny milestone, an extra ounce gained, a day without crisis. Nikki pulled through, but the challenges continued. She later developed vision problems and was eventually diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome. For Dickinson, the experience reshaped everything. Career choices were no longer just about scripts or screen time, they were about proximity to home. She began turning down roles, some of them major opportunities, in order to be more present. Among them was the iconic part of Hot Lips Houlihan in MAS*H, a role she passed on because it would have meant too much time away from her daughter. Even when she landed Police Woman in 1974, she insisted on boundaries. Dickinson refused to work overtime, choosing instead to be home in time to cook dinner for Bacharach and Nikki. It was a rare stance in an industry built on long hours and blurred personal lines. But for Dickinson, domestic life wasn't something to be squeezed in between shoots, it was the core of everything else. Her decision to prioritize family meant stepping away from the kind of blockbuster roles that might have taken her further up the Hollywood ladder. But she never seemed to regret it. Her choices spoke of a woman who understood the cost of fame and chose deliberately when and how to pay it. Before Police Woman launched her into superstardom, Angie Dickinson was clear about one thing: she didn't want to be more famous than her husband. But that's exactly what happened. As Angie's career surged in the mid-1970s, Burt Bacharach was navigating rocky terrain professionally. He hit a rough patch, most notably when his longtime collaborator Dionne Warwick sued him in a contract dispute. At home, the cracks were beginning to show too. Despite her deep affection for Bacharach, she once confessed she was crazy about him. Angie was the one making the real sacrifices. She drew clear boundaries at work: no weekends, no overtime, and no night shoots if she could help it. When the day wrapped, she'd head straight home to cook dinner for Bert and their daughter Nikki. Her co-star and friend Earl Holliman once said it plainly: it was tough on Angie. She was trying to hold up a successful television series and a marriage, and the strain was visible. By 1976, just 2 years into Police Woman, Angie and Bert had quietly begun living apart. The marriage wasn't over, at least not officially, but they were no longer sharing the same day-to-day life. Bacharach spent most of his time at their beach house in Del Mar, while Angie stayed in their Beverly Hills home with Nikki. Friends called it a weird arrangement, and Angie didn't disagree. Still, she insisted they were working through it in their own way. "We're dating other people," she once said, "but I still consider myself married to Bert. Quite married. I love him. I adore him." That sense of loyalty lingered, but it couldn't stop the drift. After 5 years of separation, they divorced in 1981. Angie blamed herself, at least in part. She said she spent too many hours on set, and if the roles had been reversed, she would have left too. Bacharach eventually married songwriter Carol Bayer Sager. Angie wished him well, acknowledging that he needed someone who understood him on a level she never quite reached. Still, their connection never entirely dissolved. Angie kept his photos around the house, and their love for Nikki remained a central bond between them. Nikki was musically inclined just like her father. She played the drums and had a curiosity for science, nature, and the world around her. In some ways, she was entirely unlike her mother. Angie once recalled Nikki telling her they'd never be equally feminine, a moment that stuck with her. Despite years of battling vision problems and Asperger's syndrome, Nikki found a sense of purpose in studying geology at Cal Lutheran University. With her father's help, she managed to earn her degree, but her poor eyesight prevented her from pursuing a career in the field. In April 2012, Nikki died by suicide in her apartment in Thousand Oaks. She was 40 years old. The details were heartbreaking. She used a plastic bag and helium to end her life. Seeking, as Bert's spokesperson later said, peace from the mental and emotional weight she had carried for so long. She quietly and peacefully committed suicide to escape the ravages to her brain brought on by Asperger's, the statement read. Nikki had loved science, glacial cycling, meteor showers, earthquakes, kitties, sunsets, and Tahiti. Bert had even written a song called Nikki for her back in 1969, long before they fully understood her struggles. Her death was a shattering blow for both parents. For Angie, it was the kind of pain that never fully lifts. The loss marked the end of a long, difficult chapter, a life shaped by fame, by sacrifice, and by the quiet enduring love of a mother who never stopped showing up. Though Angie faced a heartbreaking chapter in her life, there were still moments of sunshine where she fell deeply in love. Who was the love of Angie Dickinson's life? He was the love of her life, but not the man she married. Angie Dickinson and Frank Sinatra shared a passionate on-and-off romance that spanned 2 decades. Despite their deep connection and mutual affection, they never walked down the aisle. For a love as intense as theirs, some things still stood in the way. Sinatra, who was married 4 times throughout his life, nearly took a different path with Dickinson. The Policewoman star later revealed that she and Sinatra seriously considered marriage, but ultimately it never happened. Even though she describes him as the love of her life, Dickinson admitted there were reasons she couldn't say yes. Their story began in 1953 when they met backstage at the Colgate Comedy Hour. At the time, Dickinson was married to her first husband, Gene Dickinson, while Sinatra was with his second wife, Ava Gardner. Still, sparks flew. Sinatra asked if she was attached, and when she said yes, he replied, "Should I take your number anyway?" She gave it to him. Their chemistry carried over to the screen when they co-starred in Ocean's 11 in 1960, where Dickinson played Danny Ocean's wife, Beatrice. That same year, she divorced her husband. From then on, she and Sinatra remained connected, sometimes romantically, sometimes as close friends, but always with a bond that defied easy definition. In a 2016 interview with Studio 10, Dickinson reflected on their relationship. "He was the most important man in my life. We were lovers on and off for many years. They even talked about getting married in 1964. In a later interview with Fox News, she said, "We actually talked about it. We were so comfortable with each other that it wasn't really necessary, but it did come up a couple of times. I wasn't keen on it. I would not have wanted to take that challenge on." That challenge, as she explained, was Sinatra's nocturnal lifestyle. He went to bed at 6 a.m. She told Entertainment Weekly, "I was crazy about him. He was fabulous. He was absolutely the love of my life, though I would not have wanted to be married to him." Sinatra had his own reservations as well. He once told Dickinson, "I'm not going to marry a movie star." Dickinson laughed at the irony considering he later married actress Mia Farrow in 1966 and had previously been married to Ava Gardner. In an interview with CBS Sunday Morning, Dickinson recalled responding, "I don't blame you. I wouldn't wish that on anybody." She added, "And I actually didn't want to marry him, so I didn't want him to ask me because I didn't want to say no to Frank Sinatra." Despite not marrying, their bond endured until Sinatra's death in 1998. Dickinson went on to marry composer Burt Bacharach in 1965. Today, Dickinson remembers Sinatra with great fondness and a smile. "He was the love of my life," she told Fox News. "It feels good to think about him. He was an extraordinary talent to say the least when you look at his ability to act and sing. He didn't always take challenges, but I think he could have sung anything," she added with affection. "He was also an extraordinary man. He was difficult, wonderful, brave, and foolish." Their love story may not have ended in marriage, but it left a lasting impression, a bittersweet reminder that sometimes the most meaningful relationships are the ones that don't follow the traditional path. The truth about Angie Dickinson and John Wayne's relationship: Angie Dickinson may have been a trailblazer on television, but off-screen her life was just as captivating and at times scandalous. Take her on and off-again relationship with Sinatra. Among the whispers that followed her Hollywood rise was a persistent rumor that she had a romantic fling with none other than John Wayne. But was it true? Did sparks really fly beyond the set, or was it all smoke and no fire? While some stories fade with time, the connection between Dickinson and Wayne is one that still invites curiosity, in part because of the undeniable chemistry they shared on screen. John Wayne, the rugged icon of westerns, had shared the screen with many strong female leads over the years, but according to the Duke himself, none left quite the impression that Angie Dickinson did. The two first crossed paths in 1958 during the making of I Married a Woman. In this light-hearted comedy, Wayne made a cameo playing himself, and Dickinson portrayed his on-screen wife. Though their screen time together was brief, something clicked. Despite the 24-year age gap, they hit it off immediately. What started as a professional collaboration would go on to span multiple films and allegedly a deeper personal connection. Their second time sharing a set came years later in the 1966 war film Cast a Giant Shadow. But their most memorable and celebrated collaboration, the one that etched their chemistry into cinema history, was Rio Bravo in 1959, directed by the legendary Howard Hawks. Rio Bravo has grown in stature over the decades and is now considered one of the greatest westerns ever made, with its gripping mix of action, romance, and tension. It showed audiences a different side of John Wayne, one softened by Dickinson's presence. She played Feathers, a bold, witty showgirl who starts an unlikely romance with Wayne's tough, no-nonsense sheriff. Unlike most of Wayne's earlier films, Rio Bravo dared to give his character a romantic ending. As Walter Brennan's character famously says in the final moments, "Sheriff's got himself a girl." That wasn't typical for Wayne. His characters were often too rough, too focused, too closed off for love stories to bloom. But with Dickinson, it worked, and that's no coincidence. She brought something out of him that few others could. The affection between them wasn't just in the script, it felt real, natural, and deeply believable. For her part, Dickinson never missed an opportunity to praise Wayne, describing him as adorable. In later interviews, in a 2011 conversation with Austin Culture Map, she noted how Rio Bravo showed a different side of the famously stoic actor, a softer, more vulnerable side. "I think it's a side of him we didn't see in a lot of his movies," she said. It's hard to argue with that. Her performance in Rio Bravo remains one of her finest and one that helped humanize the larger-than-life cowboy. Still, while her on-screen chemistry was electric, what about off-screen? Hollywood insiders and old fans have long speculated about whether the two shared a romance in real life. The rumors were never confirmed, but they were never quite denied either. It didn't help that Dickinson, throughout her career, was linked romantically to many high-profile men, Frank Sinatra being one of the most well-known. But John Wayne, that one lingers precisely because of the heat they generated on screen and the mutual admiration they expressed in interviews. Wayne himself once said, as quoted in Michael Mann's John Wayne, the man behind the myth, "We were damn lucky to have Angie Dickinson. She had beauty, appeal, and brains." That's high praise coming from a man who worked with some of Hollywood's finest women, including Maureen O'Hara, his most frequent co-star. But Wayne's compliment didn't stop there. "She was one of the best actresses I ever worked with," he added, elevating her from mere screen partner to standout collaborator. Dickinson's character Feathers doesn't even appear in Rio Bravo until the second act, but once she does, she steals every scene she's in. Her wit, poise, and confidence go toe-to-toe with Wayne's towering screen presence. She doesn't just play the love interest, she matches the sheriff's strength with her own. Interestingly, Rio Bravo has only grown in stature with time. Though well received in 1959, it wasn't until years later that critics and filmmakers began to recognize its true impact. In 2008, the American Film Institute nominated it as one of the top 10 westerns of all time. In 2014, it was added to the Library of Congress's National Film Registry for being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. Its fingerprints are everywhere, even in modern films. Director John Carpenter famously cited it as a key influence on his 1976 thriller Assault on Precinct 13. And it's not just the story or direction that makes Rio Bravo so enduring. The cast, from Walter Brennan's unforgettable turn as Stumpy to musician actors Dean Martin and Ricky Nelson, all bring something special. But at its heart, it's the interaction between Wayne and Dickinson that gives the film its spark. It's rare to see a western of that era balance grit and romance so elegantly, and rarer still for that romance to feel so alive. As for those rumors, neither Dickinson nor Wayne ever fully addressed them, and perhaps that's part of the magic. In an era where Hollywood secrets were guarded and legends carefully cultivated, some truths were better left unspoken. What we're left with is the legacy of a film and a pairing that continues to captivate audiences more than 6 decades later. Whether they were lovers off-screen or simply shared an extraordinary bond on screen, one thing is clear: Angie Dickinson and John Wayne created a cinematic memory that still smolders with possibility. What do you think about Angie Dickinson and Frank Sinatra's relationship? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the following video shown on your screen, you will enjoy it.